Everybody, welcome to today's lesson. I'm Tedros Kide from Automotive Technology Department. Today I'll try to present about week 6 part 2 video, which is test and servicing manual transmission. If you remember in the last video, which is week 6 part 1 video, I'll try to cover road test a vehicle for transmission problem. In that part, we was discussing about what tasks or what tests are performed during road test of the vehicle. In today's part, I will try to cover two contents: transmission noise test and on vehicle service. In this part, what we are checking or seeing is transmission noise test with some testing instrument. Mostly we use this stethoscope in different application, especially in the vehicle part. To hurt some noise or to magnify some noise, we use this stethoscope. We can simply put in our ear and we will put on the suspected parts, and we can hear where exactly the sound is come from. So, for example, mostly in the gearbox part, there is if there is some noise, most probably the noise is come from like a failed front or rear bearing or defective needle bearing in the counter or input shaft. If you remember, the input shaft will have a bearing which supports internally with the main shaft and externally with the gearbox housing. So which means if this bearing is failed, we hear some noise, and to detect that noise, we can put this one simply in a specific part or in the suspected part, and we can hear. So this one will be magnified our the noise, and we can detect or decide whether it requires rebuilding or not. In the next part, just we will check or perform on vehicle service. So which means if we have some problem and if we specify the problem by different mechanism, what we need to do is uh, we should check or perform service on the vehicle we proceed to rebuilding. So the first we should check is check the manual transmission's oil level at each preventive maintenance schedule, or before we proceed to the main works, for example, main rebuilding work. To check the manual transmission oil level, if you observe here is a filler plug, and at the bottom we will obtain the drain plug, or you can see in this schematic diagram for transaxle and transmission, this one is the filler plug and this one is the drain plug. At the same time, in transaxle you can see front wheel drive or rear wheel drive system, so you will get this one. What we need to do is to check the level. In most case, we open this filler plug and we will insert our finger simply, and we can check whether there is oil or not, because the oil is filled at the half of the gearbox system. This one is one thing. What we should some have some note on this part is always it's highly recommended to refer manufacturer recommendation to select appropriate gear oil. Of course, in most cases the manual gearbox uses uh, SA90 viscosity oil or 75W or winter oil, but it's better to check or refer the manufacturer recommendation or manual before we add new oil on our system. Whenever the vehicle is in hoisted for any service or work, other than oil change, also we need to sure check for oil leaks. Uh, in most cases, oil leak is the best indicator of failure for the systems. Uh, if the drivetrain system, whether it's differential, gearbox, or any part of drivetrain system, if they have oil leak, means with short period of time, the system requires maintenance and is an indication of failure. Again, if there is water or rust is mixed in the drain oil when we drain the oil for replacement or for repairing or rebuilding, we need to sure or check boot of the transmission, because mostly if the gearbox boot is damaged or the seals are damaged, which prevents the entrance of dirt, the entrance of like water, which will be freely enter to the gearbox system, and it leads to hard shifting. At the same time, the transmission part will be worn, the inside part, which means the gear, the bearings, and the shift mechanism, especially the internal shifting mechanism. In the next part, we will focus on diagnosis, transmission, travel. In this part, we will try to see that how we perform diagnosis, transmission, travels. The key to diagnose your manual transmission problem is to collect and elaborate data concerning the actual problem. For example, which means the first one is we will try to perform test. So the diagnosis is just it is somehow advanced, one step advanced than the test, which means specifying the exact problem. So when we perform diagnosis, we must consider that. For example, does the problem appear in only one of the gear or not? Which means, for example, if there is hard shifting, if the hard shifting is happened in one specific gear, if there is some sound, if the sound is happening in that gear, we must assure that one. Again, uh, only at a precise speed or only when turning. So we must consider also this one. If the problem is happen when the vehicle is turning or at some speed level, we must check. We must check also whether the problem is happen in during downshifting, or is the problem is happened after having some service clutch part or another transmission component, because sometimes when we perform some service or repair, if it doesn't not repair properly or appropriately, which causes some problem on our system. And did we have some vibration or some clinking or grinding noise or sounds? So by this mechanism, we can specify the noise. So to correlate the noise with the common cause, we can use some tables and specify the problem. For example, if the system is noisy in a particular gear with engine running, which means damaged gear, the cause for this problem is maybe damaged gear or worn bearing, input shaft bearings worn. Sometimes this input shaft bearing worn problem will be goes away or off when we depress the clutch pedal. So it happens, for example, when we depress the clutch pedal, the sound will be not avail or off. When we release, it will become on, because if the case is the input shaft bearing, when we depress the clutch pedal, we will interrupt the power from the clutch disc. So that will be one thing to help to for specifying our problem. The second one, lack of lubricating oil. Of course, if there is not lubricating oil, it leads us to noise or just hard shifting. We will see in the next part also. Clutch release bearing worn. Again, if the clutch release bearing or throwout bearing is worn, again, it's an indication of some failure, which leads us or which will be the cause for noise on the system. At this time, when we depress the clutch pedal, this noise will be magnified or higher than the previous. So if that is the case, we can specify the problem is the clutch release mechanism or uh, throwout bearing. The second one is noise in neutral when the engine is running. So if the case is noise in neutral, input shaft bearing war, lack of lubricating oil, clutch release bearing war. So this is a critical thing, difficult to engage gears, which means hard engagement or hard to shift. This is due to clutch problem. If there is some parts problem, adjustment problem, something. If there is the gear linkage or the clutch linkage mechanism or the shifting linkage mechanism is not appropriately adjusted or correctly adjusted, it will happen. Worn synchro mesh unit will lead, synchronizer unit will lead to difficult for gear engagement. Lack of lubricant is another issue. The last one, jump out of gear. For the jump out of gear, the first one is detent not working, worn selector fork, gear linkage worn or not adjusted correctly. Weak synchronizer unit will be the problem. So if you observe here, most problem is happened by, look, lack of lubrication, lack of lubrication, lack of lubrication. So which means before we proceed to another thing, initially we need to check the lubricant condition. That's why by checking this lubricant condition or adjusting properly or maintaining the clutch, I mean the gearbox lubricant properly and using by using appropriate oil, that way we can extend the lifespan of our gearbox system. Okay, let's have some summary on this part. Uh, my summary is focused on the three basic things. Just before starting the road test, we must do something, some common cause of shifting problem, and during maintenance, what things we need to consider. The first one is before starting the road test, we should check the clutch pedal to see if it feel normal and uh, is the action is described or not. While driving, just shift the transmission through the gear and identify if any problem is there. We should note that if it is easily shift into all gear and if the gear changes feel smooth, just our road test is functional in one perspective. If there is some problem, which means if the gears are not shift and if they are not smooth or have sound, we can put some causes for the shifting problem, which includes maybe worn clutch components, the gearbox oil problem, or uh, for example, worn clutch component, which prevents the clutch from fully disengaged, and low or contaminated gearbox oil, which increases the friction and which leads to stuck the parts uh, and which makes the shifting difficult. So we must assure this critical thing in as a summary. Uh, the last part is during maintenance, we should check the manual transmission's oil level at each preventive maintenance session and always follow the manufacturer recommendation for the appropriate gear oil. Whenever the vehicle is hoisted for any service work, we should inspect for oil leak and ensure the transmission boot is intact if water or rust is found in the drained oil. In the next part, we can see also one thing to diagnose the transmission problem. We should collect detailed data about the issue, which means diagnose means triangulation by triangulating different data or observing from the different perspective, which helps to specify the real problem or which helps to know the root cause of the problem. So we should collect detailed data about the issue, determine if the problem occur in specific gear, at precise speed, while turning, during downshifting, or after servicing the clutch or another transmission component. And also we should check for any vibration or noise, such as clinking or grinding noise, which means this vibration and noise are best indicator of the failure of the system. This is all about today's presentation or video. Thank you for your full attention. As always, if you have any question, suggestion, comment, just you are welcome by this email. I'm ready to assist you. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a nice time.